Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mind Spark Monday. I'm Melissa Boston, here with you from MindWorks Collaborative. And we have two wonderful special educators with us today. We have Latasha and Sade, both who are proud graduates of the GW Teaching Students with Emotional and Behavioral Disabilities Master's Program. Big up to GW. So I'm going to go ahead and toss it to these ladies. We'll start with you, Latasha. Why don't you let us know what state you are currently teaching in or doing your work in, what population you work with, kind of how long you've been in the field, just a little bit about
Okay, so currently I'm in Washington, D.C., Ward 8. Um, this is my 15th year teaching. I cannot believe I'm at year 15 already.
Me either. Oh my goodness.
But yes, I am year 15. So currently I'm actually a restorative practices teacher, which is new to me. I'm super excited about it because my background has essentially been in the classroom where I've always had content per se. But I'm excited because to me, this taps in more into my master's program, you know, the EBD, the behavior management, the making connections with kids and teachers. Of course, COVID had kind of thrown a monkey wrench into things, but still excited nonetheless. This year, I will say, has been challenging, but in the same token, it's really been an eye-opener for me and just how I can support parents more so even further than that educational realm and that academic realm, making those connections stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you actually just gave us a lot to talk about. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead to Sade and let her introduce herself. Let us know how long you've been working in the field, what you're currently doing, and anything else that you might want to say.
No problem. I too teach in Washington, D.C. In Ward 8. I am an English language arts special education teacher. I've been teaching special education for about 4 years now, but I've been in education for about 10 years. And like Ms. Perry said, I can't believe I'm at 10. It doesn't even
Right.
seem like it's been 10 years. I work with a small group population that people often overlook in the education systems, and I work really hard to make sure they have a voice and advocate for their needs, especially during COVID. It's been hard on my babies trying to be successful doing this remotely, along with having their disabilities and trying to mask those throughout the computer-based systems. But we're working together. We'll get through this together, and hopefully this information today will help other teachers.
Absolutely, absolutely. So to be clear, you both are trained in special education. So the master's is in teaching students with emotional and behavioral disabilities.
Yes.
Correct, right. And so, but it seems as if there's been a little bit of a segue, maybe Latasha, for you in working with also at-risk students. Okay. Okay.
I mean,
So,
for the training, it works for all populations, you know,
right,
especially,
right.
you know, when you're dealing with situations where you may have kids who've been affected by trauma, but they may not have a actual disability. It's definitely still been helpful.
Yeah, and we see that a lot, especially in our urban areas. In restorative justice, yeah. I'm sorry, I was just going to say restorative justice seems to be really kind of permeating a lot of, you know, school programs that service kids with EBD, and again, those in more urban settings with kids who are, you know, deemed at risk.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What were you going to say, Sade?
I was going to say, and that was probably one of the reasons why I got into the master's program at GW, because working in the gen ed setting, a lot of times we've seen those at-risk students who go undiagnosed or overlooked and not get the support they need. And I felt like it would help me in my teacher craft if I knew the needs of all the students, and that way I can reach all of my students and not just a particular population of students.
Correct, yeah. So as far as demographic that you serve, primarily African Americans, I assume?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, in your demographic, yeah, okay. All right, well, we would like to focus today on, how, just kind of hearing from you ladies around, you mentioned it, Latasha, the whole, pivot, full on, turn here to virtual teaching and distance learning. And so considering that you both are working with students who, have specialized needs, I'll ask you, Sade, what are some of the challenges that you're facing? Because you had mentioned that your kids are struggling. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you're having and you're seeing?
Yeah, so some of the challenges that I am having is my students are used to one-to-one instruction or visual, handheld materials. It's kind of hard to get them their handheld materials and having them to look at a screen and watch me at the same time. So I see there's a struggle there. Also, some of my babies don't even know how to use the computer because that's not something we use often. So it's so many barriers we have to break down just to get to the content that they get frustrated before we even get to the content because they don't understand how to log on to 2 websites at one time or how to read from the screen. And we don't have that many, what do you call those little things, like them functionalities that we can have in the school, like read aloud, or I could read to you, or I could pre-record it, but it's different from being in person and you could directly ask that person. And then we have asynchronous time worked in, and that's independent work time. And my students didn't have that much independent work time. They always work with the person. So trying to accommodate them and be more available to them as a teacher is weighing heavy on me because I'm with them longer than I've ever been with them. And I know they get tired of hearing my voice all day. So the monotony of it is a challenge. The engagement is a challenge. What else? I think that's my 2 biggest concerns: the engagement, the monotony, and not being able to work with them, hands-on with them, and show them directly, as opposed to them watching a video of me or being in a Zoom class with me for 90 minutes and being bored, because that's not how we usually operate.
Right. So as far as the school that you're working, is it a private school, like non-public charter, or is it a district school?
It's a public charter.
Okay. And have you found that they have resources to kind of help you with the areas of concern, especially around the differentiated learning approaches, and then, different platforms for the engagement to kind of mix it up?
Yeah, so I'm very grateful to be working with this public charter because they do have a lot of resources that we can implement throughout the day. They have been ongoing looking for more support in ways we constantly meet weekly to see if there's anything we can do differently, any ways we can help our children and even help our parents as well. So I'm really grateful for that. But we do have a wealth of resources available for our SPED population. However, it's just new and it's not what they're used to. So it takes some time for them to get adjusted to that change.
So are you finding that, well, I guess twofold. So are you finding that the kids that you're teaching have an adult in the space, in the room with you, assisting you? That's the first part. And the second part of that is, and do you have a paraprofessional or, a co-teacher that's helping you implement your lessons during the time that they're with you?
So as far as the students having a parent or an adult in the home, I could say 9 times out of 10, no. Our parents are still working, so they truly rely on us as teachers to help the children as much as they can. And I know the parents want to help because I am a parent and I have a child that's in school. However, I have to work. So I tend to ignore my son, even though he works right behind me, doing some of those classes where we're together at the same time. I cannot help him. So to no fault of the parent, no, there are a lot of students without adult support in the home. As for me as a special educator, usually I would be the one in the classroom supporting the gen ed teacher. However, I am on my own with my sped population. So no, even though it would better benefit the children if I did have a support person in the room with me. At this time, we do not. So it's like juggling a beast. So I implement things like small group or stations to help alleviate some of those problems I have in the classroom. And we've been at it for about 7 weeks. I know when we first started COVID during the last school year, it was kind of rough, but they gave us some time to get adjusted and get ready for the 2021 school year. And for the past 7 weeks, I feel I've been at my best and as successful as I can be. And I don't think it's hindering or hurting the kids, but I know more support, the better it will be for the children.
Before I go to you, Tasha, to just talk about that kind of support piece, because I know you had mentioned before we got on camera that you are in a new role, and that role is to support teachers in the classroom. But before we get there, Sade, I just wanted to ask, what is the student to teacher ratio in your classrooms right now?
All right, so the expected student ratio was supposed to be 10 to 1. We are about at maybe 13 to 14 to 1.
That even 10 to 1 is a large number for a special educator, and then add the virtual piece. Wow.
Our numbers are growing. We did not expect our population to grow this fast or as much, but for this school year, our numbers increased dramatically. So yes, it's about 14 for the 7th grade. I know it's 13 to 1, and for 8th grade, it's like 10 to 1.
Now now I have to ask, your numbers increased because why?
I have no idea. I know we added new grades to our school. So I know there's a lot of sibling relationships that came when the new kids came. But 7th grade has took a dramatic hit as an increase because we had about maybe 10 SPED students in the 7th grade, but we grew to 14 this school year. Or maybe it's like 18 or 19, but 12 or 13 who requires small group resource. I don't know. That's a conversation me and Ms. Prue was having a couple weekends ago. Why is the SPED population so huge in Ward 8?
Yeah.
So that's something we're trying to figure out.
Yeah, I would wonder when that means that there would be money to hire an additional educator, SPED educator, or paraprofessional. All right, so let me jump over to Latasha, and we'll come back to you, Sade, for some of the successes that you're seeing in the classroom. So we'd love for you to share some things that are actually working,
okay,
in hopes that there are teachers out there that are watching this that can have some takeaways. All right, Tasha, so talk to us about that segue. So you are currently functioning as this restorative justice teacher and kind of what that entails. And then, I'm interested in knowing the job prior to COVID. And now that we're in COVID, what are you actually able to do and implement?
Right. So prior to COVID, the expectation was that I would basically act as a bridge to teachers with students who may present different behavioral concerns, whether that means supporting that student more, or it could also mean giving that teacher tips and resources and how to better help the child adapt to the classroom space. In this, and that would have been for a specific grade level. Okay. So now that we're in COVID, that looks very different during distance learning, mainly because what I've noticed is some of the behaviors have actually decreased because students are home and they may have a parent present to monitor. In the same token, students who still have certain challenges, let's say something like disruption or something like that. I think the biggest challenge is for both teachers and students to come to this understanding that this is not normal school. And that's okay. I think that from what I've been seeing in the trend, many school systems seem to operate as if, school just continues as if it normally would. And to me, that's just a big mistake for the stress of teachers, the stress of parents, and the stress of children. And so my role now has almost been like more of a bridge between parents and distance learning. So I find myself now making connections with parents that stem further than academics. So we talk about maybe things that may be happening in the home that could possibly hinder a child from accessing education. Rather, that means that the child may have to help another student in the home, or the child may be home by themselves. And I work with younger students. I'm not with middle school, but even still, some students may have to be at home alone for a number of hours during the day. And so I'm really trying to work with parents and just keeping that communication open so that we can have grace towards these kids. It's not school, it's not normal school as we know it. And I think that it's important to extend grace and to understand that as much as we want to really hold kids accountable, for instance, to logging in on time, being prepared, being there even 5 minutes before class starts, there will be some cases where that might not be possible, and that is okay. And to make those accommodations for students, even if they don't have IEP, even if they don't have a 504 plan, but just understanding that we can still be successful if we give some grace, if we are committed to helping families and parents. But I think as a teacher, that calls for us extending ourselves more than we normally would, maybe getting a little more personal than we normally would. And in order for parents to open up and really share their problems or their hurdles so that we can help them, it all just really relies on the communication factor and building those relationships with families.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point around, the learning curve, right? So how are you distinguishing between, what they're struggling with as it relates to content, versus just not understanding how to operate some of the technical stuff, the laptop or the iPad, the Chromebook.
Right.
What is their ability to kind of follow those multi-step directions as it relates to just signing on to their classroom, clicking links, using a mouse. I mean, I know this is something they teach in some pre-K programs and kindergarten programs now. It's just being able to navigate with those fine motor skills. So, and I know you're working in that lower grade level. So I can imagine that, that I think you said it perfectly, extending grace is what we all need to do. This shift in how we function as a village also, I think, is showing itself, right? Kind of this need to really make a connection and impart on the adults who are caring for the child, how important it is that they show up every day and that, they engage as much as possible, but then relying on them to take these materials and even work with them later on or on, their independent time. I imagine that you are really trying to figure out kind of how you are, supposed to be working and functioning.
Yeah.
When you mentioned that, so Sade mentioned 7 weeks in, I'm wondering if there was a comparison of data from behavioral intervention, perspective of last year versus this year, what it is that you're actually seeing and dealing with. Because a lot of people have brought up the point that they're not seeing as many behaviors. But we know there's external and there's internal. And I just wonder internally, how kids are managing and what will happen once, what will happen like once we hit December, what that's gonna look like. But go ahead, you were gonna say something.
Yeah, I was saying that I think that plays into student buy-in and family buy-in. Like, are families holding students accountable or reiterating that this is still real school? Or is it like, just log in and, just show your face type of situation? And I think that's where that village piece comes in, where I have to reiterate to parents that, yes, this is real school. It matters. Grades are still going in. And in the same token, understanding that many parents are having difficulties, especially when there's multiple children at home.
Yeah.
And just having that grace with themselves and the patience with their children, and having to almost feel like they're a co-teacher at home. And then do some of the parents have the skill sets to help? I think it's so many different pieces. And like you said, even though the behaviors may not present themselves physically, I think internally, it may be many factors going on. And I think the only way to really know these things is to have great relationships and allow students that time to share or to express, and to feel safe still in a virtual setting. Take a temperature of their overall well-being, which means that some of those check-ins and phone calls that we do may have to not focus so much on academics and just focus on how are you handling this?
Yeah. I've heard that across the board. Go ahead, Sade.
I was just going to piggyback too, because a lot of if you review like a lot of my IEPs, they say like student X wasn't able to stay steady in the gen ed setting, or student X often needed breaks from the gen ed setting, so they have to take like these type of accommodations were being set out for them, that now in a remote setting doesn't even need to be addressed or acknowledged, because I'm pushing babies back into the gen ed setting, because I realized that I'm teaching the same thing in the gen ed setting and my resource setting, just at a slower pace. However, I feel like they can manage in a remote setting via gen ed. So the behaviors that, and I had another person call me last week, how is student acting in class? He sits in front of the computer and does the work. We don't see those same behaviors that we saw in the school building. And a lot of that goes into the rapport you build with your students. We had like maybe the first 2 or 3 weeks, the first 2 weeks of school, we just built rapport. We learned each other, try to figure out, is so-and-so mom's going to be with them in the morning? Whose parent's going to be home? I would call parents. And as a parent, I went to school for high school. My master's is in high school, secondary education. My bachelor's is in secondary education. I've never taught preschool a day in my life. So trying to teach ABCs is a struggle for me. So I'm telling my parents, I understand your struggles, because I don't know what I'm doing at home with my own child. I don't know how to teach ABCs and how to count the teens. That's a personal struggle.
I hear you.
I understand that they having struggles. And like Ms. Prue said, that village, I understand that, Mom, you at work during 7 to 3. I'm not going to call you during those times. I'll wait till 5 o'clock. And like I was telling another one of my SPED compliance manager, that I do a lot of my calls and stuff on the weekends when parents have downtime.
Yeah.
I know that's more of me working outside of my hours. However, that's when I'm free as a mom, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So just extending that grace and understanding that this is not normal.
Yeah.
So you cannot have
Yeah.
any type of normalcy around it. And just do what you have to do. And that's what we're doing, what we have to do for our babies to be successful and for our parents to be successful, because it is hard at home. And one of my biggest complaints was earlier in the school year when all this happened, we don't know who our children are between 7 and 3. We haven't been with them that long in years. So I had to call my son's teacher and was like, what do you do at 11 o'clock? Help me. Because that's the relationship you have to have, because you don't know. And I want my parents to feel that comfortable. I want my students to feel comfortable and also have that safe space amongst us to know that I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not here to judge you. I'm just here to help you. And that feels that.
I think, I think what you're both referring to, well, first and foremost, our background and our training was in, the foundation of the work we do. It starts with relationship, right? So I 100% vibe with you around like how powerful, and I think this is a lesson, honestly, you can use and apply in a lot of other industries. But for us, this is a pillar. With that being said, though, I think what you're both doing is creating that space in these first couple of months to shore everybody up, right? To shore up the parents, to shore up your students, to even shore yourself up to a certain degree around like, okay, I identify this is not kind of quote unquote normal and what we have done in the past. However, we are in this together, and together we are going to take some academic risks here, right? So you're kind of gearing them up to start then opening up around some of the challenges they may be having, and really get in to do some good work. So with that being said, talk to me, Sade, about, and then we'll go to Latasha, but talk to me, Sade, about things that are working. So this relationship building and this piece of ensuring that the family unit, right, those who are the support system to the student, you are also kind of a support system to both of, to the parents and to the child. What other things are working as it relates to delivery of content or, learning opportunities? What's working for you?
So like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the challenges I was having can also be looked at as successes that I'm having. Like all of the new resources that are available, we are trying something new just to see what works. So like multiple computer engagement activities such as like Nearpod, Press, Newsella, all of those things. Newsella has Read Aloud, and I love that. And Newsella functions as a readers-based level. So whatever level that reader is on, it automatically does it for you. So I'm like, and they changed the comprehension questions based on the readability of the so that's I love those. And I love what's the camaraderie amongst all of the teachers coming together to brain dump all of the resources that they have that you can use. And I'm mad that my mind is drawn up brain fart right now. There's this one computer program where you can see the students working in real time. You could correct them and guide them as they're working. So
Nearpod.
Oh yeah, Nearpod, but it's this other one you can see them typing. It's on my desk somewhere. It's called like X something. I'm gonna look for it. I'm gonna try to find it while we're doing it. So that is working. Also computer-based interventions. We did use those in the during the school in the building. So the kids were already familiar with that. So they know how to work the stations, and it's helping them build their skills such as decoding and fluency. And one thing I truly love about Zoom is these breakout rooms. So when I'm doing my assessments, they get to be done privately. It's just me and you in the room, without your classmates hearing you read. So employing those engagement tools and out my lesson makes it most successful. What makes it engaging? The kids love it. We also do like morning meeting every morning to get everyone started. And we end together every afternoon with an independent read and a checkout to make sure everyone's good. What else? And that's it. That private. instruction, that's pretty much it.
Those are great. And I see you incorporating some of those best practices in there with check in and check out. PBIS talks a lot about that. I think it's very important to know where your kids are when they enter into the space, and you want to shore them up when they leave. I know Baltimore County, we had a teacher friend of mine on MindSpark Monday a couple Mondays ago, and she was talking about how they do that kind of check in and check out process. And so that's a big county and a big district, but she definitely, you know, is kind of catching on. I feel like sometimes those of us in the field of special education, especially studying kind of in the master's and the PhD realm, we kind of know that there are certain practices that we use that would be good and transcend whether you're a gen ed or a special ed student. But sometimes it takes a little bit of time for our gen ed folks to kind of say, okay, I'm going to take this on. I agree with this. So Latasha, talk to us about, before we wrap up here, talk to us about some of the things that are working for you.
Definitely having that balance between building those connections with families on a more personal level, but still holding kids firm in regards to academics, and being able to talk with parents about data. Still keeping those assessments going so that you can see and monitor student growth, especially in this type of setting. I think it's important because we're not so hands-on. And so we still have to be able to have that temperature guide of where students are and talk to parents about where they still need to practice maybe off screen, one-on-one. So I think definitely still do the assessments. I think that's still important. Still share the data. The pullouts are everything. Ms. Prue definitely touched on that. Do pullouts. Still continue to do the small group. As much as this is not normal school, we still can incorporate a lot of the things that made us successful in school virtually. And I think, and finally, having PBIS functions. We have like Wacky Wednesdays, having kids buy in and have things to look forward to, having them have something to motivate them to get through, you know, the school day. It can be a long time sitting at a computer, but to constantly have engaging activities and things that are encouraging them, and to see that they are on task, they are doing what they're supposed to do, they're gaining those points to work towards a goal, I think is something major that schools should, or teachers can implement in their classrooms, even if the school as a whole doesn't. This is definitely something that can be done in a classroom basis.
I agree with you. I mean, when we as adults have these long long day of meetings on Zoom, you get a little like, stir crazy. I can imagine, I have to say, even with my own child or my own children, like I tell them daily, like, I'm proud of you. You're doing such a good job. I just try to continue to like feed them with positive energy and positive affirmations, because this is, just to get someone to sit in front of a screen and engage and not melt down or just be like, I'm done with this.
Yes.
That is a huge accomplishment in its own. Well, I want to say thank you to you ladies for the work you're doing. It's just so wonderful to have people like you doing our work in this field. I admire the both of you. I would love to have you back too one day to talk about your co-teaching experience together. I've enjoyed having you in class, sharing that with my students, and I know they loved it. So until next Monday, folks, please check us out on the Mind Hive. And I want to encourage you too as well to share your resources in the Mind Hive. I will invite you to that if you don't have an invite already. But check us out also at www.mindworkscollab.org. Have a nice evening.